the moderator.
Whoa! It's about time.
I should start?
Yeah, you have to ask them a question.
Okay. Like, did any of you guys ever do things like as a kid that like your parents didn't agree with?
Speak up, Shira.
Okay. So like, as a kid, you guys like say your parents didn't agree with at the time?
When you were children, did you do anything that your parents did not agree with?
Yes, pretty much everything.
That's the question. Aside from Uncle Dad
You want a
and
specific
other things. Because that one we all know.
An easy question. Florence didn't agree with anything.
What was like something that was, what was one of those things you did that were like more memorable than others?
Something more memorable. What was something that, you know?
We did a lot of very
Did anybody get punished ever in your house?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so
What was the
tell us
question?
something that you got punished for.
Punished?
Yeah, what did you get punished for? You didn't get punished.
Getting up in the morning? I don't know.
Come on.
No, punished. I can't remember the reason, but I can remember the punishment. For example, they would reduce our allowance, my allowance, or I would get locked in my room. Now, my room had a chain and, you know,
A bolt.
not a bolt, a chain and a slide thing that kept the door locked
From the outside?
from the outside, if I was being punished. However, I had very thin arms and I could get through the space between the door and the chain, so I could go up there and open.
Well, I used to sit next to Toddy at the dining room table.
That was the punishment.
And sometimes just to spice Shabbos meal up, Benita would say, Toddy, stop doing that. And my father would automatically reach over to the left-hand side of the table where I sat and give Toddy a potch. And Toddy knew my father's strength, so he would lean over. And I would have to lean over so he'd be out of harm's way.
You have to understand that I was the only girl with 3 boys. In my father's eye, I could do nothing wrong. My mother was a different story. In my father's eye, I never did anything wrong. It was always them.
How many bedrooms did you have? Like,
4.
so, did anybody have their own room? other than-
Toddy, Benita, my parents had it.
And then you two shared.
We shared.
So from the womb to the room.
Exactly.
Actually, there was a bathroom between our parents' bedroom and our bedroom. So it was from the room to the tomb.
And then we had beds that potentially could be turned into double-decker beds.
But we never did.
We
We did?
And that lasted about a day. Because my mother was afraid one of us would fall out of bed.
But the funny part was, my mother...
Toddy and I shared a room, but we weren't so well behaved together. So in desperation, my mother took me and put me in with the twins. So there were the 3 of us in that room. And then, up until a certain point, we had a sleep-in maid who had a room on the 2nd floor where we all slept. And we didn't have a maid anymore. They painted the room my color blue, nice blue color, and I got my own room. So then Toddy had his room, the twins had their room, and I had my room.
And my parents had their room.
I have a question.
Either when you were a child or when you were teenagers, what is the worst or most mischievous thing you ever did that your parents never found out about?
Oh.
What answer?
That does not include marrying.
The outlaws.
Remember the fires? We used to go, there was a vacant lot about a block away, and we would light big bonfires.
Especially after Christmas, we would take all the Christmas trees that we found on the street, and we'd bring them over to the empty lot and burn them, and they really made a nice fire. Short time fire, but it made a nice fire.
But we survived.
just one
There
second.
was one time that it got a little bit out of control, and we left the lot and we heard the fire engines coming.
Well, the lot wasn't so far from the fire station, let's...
Sorry, Grandma.
Well, there's another instance. My sister used to get a lot of calls at the beginning of the week from people who wanted to go out with her. And when she did that, Jack and I, the phone was tied up. There were no cell phones. So we were out of luck. We couldn't call somebody for a date until Wednesday.
They couldn't take a call till I got a date on for the weekend.
Never had any dates.
Pretty stupid.
So one day we decided to pull a trick on Benita. And we called her up.
Wait a minute. Those were the days when you could use a nickel and a payphone. So if you had a pocket full of nickels, you could talk forever.
So one of us, with a nickel in hand, called her up.
It was me, actually. And I disguised my voice.
I beg your pardon?
That's good.
So about 20 minutes into the conversation, Jack said, by the way, does my voice sound familiar? I'm your brother Jack. Could you stop monopolizing the phone?
And of course, I came home and my sister attacked me with a roll of New York Times. And in those days, the New York Times was really a hefty journalistic exercise. And started smashing me left and right with the Times. My father woke up and saw my sister hitting me, assumed I had started the fight. And I got whacked twice. First by my sister, then by my father. But I was laughing so hard, it didn't work.
Next question.
Like, for breakfast, do you have like the same like meals every day? Like, what was
We
like?
had breakfast every morning. My mother used to make breakfast. She made, we used to
Excuse
have,
me, we were not allowed to leave the house in the morning
without breakfast.
without breakfast.
She made fresh squeezed orange juice,
For 6 people.
and they were full water glasses. They were full glasses, and we would have soft-boiled eggs, 2 eggs, usually soft-boiled, and we'd have a bowl of usually hot cereal. We didn't get cold cereal until we were well in our teens, I don't think. And she used to make like Ralston, what was a brand, and Wheatina, which is a brand. Probably some of them are still around.
It is.
And there's oatmeal, H.O. Oats. They had a whole bunch of hot cereals. My mother used to make it a double boiler on the stove. And besides all that, she used to make our lunches, which used to be carefully packed in paper bags and tied up with a string so we wouldn't lose anything. And there were sandwiches and a piece of fruit. And
So she put in a full day before we even left for school.
we'd get up in the morning and the first thing we heard was the John Gambling on the radio.
WOR.
WOR in the morning, yeah. And
He would repeat the time in like 5-minute intervals, so that kind of got you moving.
And I do remember that in the wintertime, when it snowed, and out here in New Jersey especially, he would announce all the schools that were closed. And we used to say, why can't we live in New Jersey? Because in New York, the schools never closed, no matter how hard the snow was.
Well, there was a blizzard.
47.
Was that 47?
47.
But it was during Christmas vacation, so it didn't count.
Well, it did count because Toddy and I were like shoveling. We had a 50-foot frontage on West Tremont Avenue. And by the time we finished shoveling from one side of the house to the next, there was more snow on the ground. We had to go back and shovel more. There was like 27 inches of snow fell. It's the 4th or 5th deepest snow that ever fell in New York.
And when it did snow, I used to have to shovel my next door neighbor, Mrs. Fontaine, a widow who lived next door to us. And she once gave me a dime, and my mother made me give it back. Not allowed to take the money from the neighbor. She was a good neighbor, though. She was very nice. They used to give us candy. She used to give us candy. She was a very
Her window
backyard window.
backed up sort of on our backyard,
Yeah.
so she would toss candy over the fence.
But in addition, as Mrs. Fontaine got older, my mother was concerned about her well-being, so they had an arrangement that when Mrs. Fontaine came downstairs from her house for breakfast, she lived alone, she'd raise the shade on the first floor. And so that way, my mother knew Mrs. Fontaine was okay. If the shade didn't go up, one of us had to go knock on the door.
She was a lovely woman.
Like on a normal weekday, what time did your school end?
3 o'clock.
And then what would you do like the rest of the night until like it was like time to go to bed?
In the springtime, I would be outside on the street with my friends playing stickball or pitching in, which is another form of baseball, and triangle, which is another form, stoop baseball. We had all kinds of games. We had games of seasons, like there was a season for marbles. People played with marbles. They used to have, we called them immies sometimes, marble games. And there was roller skating. We skated on skates that had steel wheels. We played hockey with the roller skates in the street. When it snowed, we would take our sleds and sled down the streets, belly walk down the streets. And so there was always something to keep us busy and to keep us to do.
And we had, a lot of our friends lived in apartment buildings, but we had a backyard. So a lot of times they were playing in our backyard. And the neighbors on the other side, he worked at night and slept during the day, so he really wasn't happy with us. We would roller skate down the alley and he was trying to sleep.
I don't get chores. Did you guys not have chores?
Certainly.
Well, you did or something you didn't?
We had chores. I was the window washer on the first floor.
And I think I had to wash the dishes and you boys had to dry. That was on Shabbos.
Yeah. Now, in addition, you overlooked one thing. Is one of our afternoon activities, depending on our age, was what I would call Hebrew lessons. We had a Hebrew tutor who came twice a week, I think. And depending what level you were at, he taught you something.
Nothing.
It wasn't a great system.
We also had the radio, which is sort of like your TVs, I suppose. But the radio was every day. There was a series of 15-minute programs geared to kids, like Tom Mix, which is a cowboy program, and Captain Midnight, which is
Green Hornet.
The Green Hornet, Gangbusters. There were all kinds of games. Superman.
Uncle Don.
Uncle Don, yeah. There were all kinds of radio programs, especially geared to kids, that had commercials for things that were for kids. For example, Tom Mix was sponsored by Ralston, the Ralston cereal, which is Checkerboard Square in St. Louis, they called it. And they used to have, as many of the programs did, they used to have these secret codes. So you'd have to send in a dime and a box top to get the secret code decoder. And then every once in a while they'd have a secret message on the radio. And if you were in the club, you could take your decoder and check it out and find out what the message was.
Eat more Ralston products.
Yeah.
We have a question back here, please.
Have you ever rode in the Rolls Royce before? Have you ever rode in the Rolls Royce before?
Did you ride in a Rolls Royce?
Yes.
Oh, did you ever ride in a Rolls Royce?
I came close. The car that we had in our family was a Duesenberg, but I had a friend whose father owned a Bentley. A Bentley is a Rolls Royce without the...
It's one step down.
One step down. And I had several nice rides in that Bentley. That's the closest I got to...
Didn't Grandpa have a Rolls Royce?
No.
So how do you have the...
He had the Duesenberg.
We were starting to build it. We got as far as the hubcap.
Actually, we had two cars. We had the Duesenberg and then we had a Willys,
No, the PSRO coupe.
which was a much smaller car.
That was after.
And during the war, when gas was rationed, we didn't use the Duesenberg, we used the Willys because it used less gas.
That's what we got the one. We had a PSRO before.
Why Grandpa stopped driving?
Yes.
The legend is,
He never drove a car that I ever saw. When the war started, he did get a driver's license, learned his permit, but he never did it. He never drove.
I heard a different version, Toddy.
You heard a different version? Okay. Let's
We
hear it.
know that around 1929,
Oh, that's he was driving then, yeah.
my father, Allah Shalom, was in a car accident. It was never clear to me whether he was the driver or the passenger. But in those days, there were no seatbelts. And so the two people in the front of the car, my father included, went through the windshield. And so my father had a series of interesting scars on his face from going through the windshield.
Which you really didn't see. It wasn't like they were, because he had a very heavy beard. Not that he had a beard, but that his beard was very dark and very heavy. So you really didn't see those marks on his
Yeah,
face.
so I never, seeing that it was a painful subject, I never interviewed him on what exactly happened. But I do know that he was in a car accident and he went through the windshield. That may have discouraged him from sitting in the front seat or driving.
No, it discouraged him from driving maybe, but he never would sit anywhere but the front seat. That's where he liked to sit. And I remember if I wrote a few years back, I sent you a little thing where I made a mistake about who got the bike, but that how we used to all sit in the Duesenberg was, in the front was my father and Harry, the chauffeur, and in the back there were 2 jump seats that you could pull back up to sit, and we would sit, and Benita and I would sit in the front, in the back seats, and in the back of the car there was another like room for 3 people, and the twins and my mother would sit in the back.
And sometimes we took my grandmother and her companion.
Yeah, and then we would, I would sit in the middle in the front.
Didn't you sit on the little chairs?
Yes, we would carry little chairs into the back of the Willys.
Yeah.
The Willys was about half the size of the Duesenberg. So it
We
was a
had
really tight fit.
a children's play table that came with 2 small chairs.
Yeah.
Those 2 small chairs fit in the back seat of the car. So
The back platform, actually.
And of course, in those days, we didn't have
made it into a
seatbelts.
6-seater.
And then, that was when then after a while, my father had to let Harry go, and we gave him the Willys as a present when he left. He was a very good person, and he was with us for probably a decade. And he did a lot of things for us. He introduced us to stamp collecting, for example. He built bikes for us.
And electric trains.
He used to do my electric train table he made, and he used to cut the shrubs, and he used to mow the grass, and he used to shovel the snow. But then
He made us a 2-wheel bicycle.
yeah, and his son came and shoveled the snow after a while. And Harry, some of you have seen that he told us a story about in the time of the First World War, maybe just before it. He was stationed he was in the army, and he was stationed at West Point. And he told us that during the winter time in West Point, first they used to cut the ice out of the Hudson River and put it in storage so they could use it in the summertime. And the other thing that he did was he saved somebody's life who was drowning in the Hudson River, and he got a medal for that from for a life-saving medal from I guess the United States government, but I don't remember what the name of the medal was.
I think it was the Carnegie Foundation.
Maybe it was from the Carnegie Foundation. That could be correct. Yeah.
He was very handy. He could fix anything.
What was his last name? Do you know?
Rummery.
Did he live with you guys?
Huh?
Did he live with you?
No.
But he came early in the morning and went home late
He
at
used to take
night.
my father around to wherever he was going in business, and he would come on Saturday nights. His day off was Shabbos, I guess. Never really had a day off. And then we had to let him go. And what else? Ask me another question.
Why did you have to let Harry go?
First of all, we couldn't afford them anymore. Second of all, there was no gas. You couldn't, if you couldn't get the gas for the car, what are you going to do? Have him hang around the house wasn't the job.
The Duesenberg was designed by a man called Willie Duesenberg, who was a racing car driver. So his idea was to build cars that could go very fast. Fuel consumption was not his concern. Speed was what he was
I
interested
mean,
in.
that was like that. The car we had, I think, was a 1932 model, which my father bought used in about 1938, 39, 37, around that time. So, and he liked big cars, he liked heavy cars, and he liked to ride, as I said before, in the front seat. That's what he liked to do.
What did you do in the summer?
My mother was not a big person about the cars, but she would sometimes use the car when she would go shopping to the stores on University Avenue. She would have Harry drive her there, like, and she, in those days there were very few supermarkets. There was the A&P, which was always considered to be like a Goyish store, and there was a grocery store, and there was a bakery, and there was a vegetable store, and there was a shoe store, and there was a haberdashery. All these were separate stores, separate little businesses that people had. Then came the supermarkets, and that changed the whole situation in terms of shopping and stores.
Mommy wouldn't shop in the A&P generally.
Except for-
because she didn't want to take her custom away from the small grocers and fruit markets and whatever that she generally patronized.
So you had a question, sir?
Yeah, what did you do in the summer?
What did we do in the summer?
Yeah.
Well, obviously, my father went to camp and met my mother, so we've all heard that story. But
I haven't heard that story.
And not only that, so did your uncle.
We went to a camp in Camp Delawaxin and Camp Delano. There was a boys and girls camp. I was the first one to go. It was about a year after the twins were born. And my mother needed to get rid of me so she could pay attention to the other children. And so I went to camp when I was about 5.5 years old, to sleepaway camp. And that was pretty young. And I went there for 4 or 5 years. I don't have any friends still from those days. I had one person who I knew from that camp who was in my bunk, who eventually moved to Englewood, and we renewed our acquaintanceship, you could say, when he came here. And it was an interesting camp. It was a nice camp. And in the end, actually, even Aunt Trudy worked there years after I left the camp, after I finished at the camp. She was there as a counselor one summer also.
Did you like camp? Was there any incidents that you wanted to, talk about?
I liked camp. It was okay. We were very busy with sports and swimming. I learned how to swim pretty well after the first season, second season. And then the twins came, Benita came as campers also. And I think I've told you this story, but I'll tell it again. One night, they used to have boxing night for the boys camp. And one night they put the twins in to box each other. So after they fought for a round or 2 or 3, whatever it wasn't too much. And they had a...
Well, they were like 5 years old?
They weren't even hitting themselves. Most of the time they had to hold up their trunks, I think. Anyway, meaning the shorts. And in the end of it, they were going to declare who was the winner, and they said, well, one of the twins is a better boxer than the other one, but we can't tell which one it is, so we'll call it a draw.
Story of my life.
But didn't Grandma go to camp with you?